Hey, it's Sol with another video, and today I'm going to go over the Q&A with Ion Hazzikostas and Josh Laura that just happened, or just ended, maybe about 15-20 minutes ago or so. I'm going to go over all the questions that were asked, I'm going to summarize their answers, and I'm going to give my thoughts. This Q&A happened to be more of a commercial for the Battle for Azeroth, repeating questions that many of us already know the answers to, some clarifications, a few revelations, and as usual, a couple things that'll piss people off and that'll get people pretty mad at Ion because it's Ion and not because of any other reason than that. So let's get started. Question 1. Are we getting blood trolls during the new expansion? And if yes, what is going to be the Alliance counterpart? No, there are not going to be blood trolls in this expansion, and whatever you might have heard from a specific IGN interview or from some YouTubers and what have you, unfortunately that was a miscommunication. There will not, in fact, be blood trolls planned for this expansion. Blood trolls are not nuanced, they are not morally gray, they are the bad guys, and like they said, we're gonna kill a lot of them.
Warcraft is not so much a world of black and white for the most part, a lot of shades of gray. Blood trolls are bad dudes. Okay. They're pretty black. We're going to kill them.
Got it.
They're pretty black. We're going to kill them. They're pretty black. They're pretty black.
And I suppose that too. Moving on. Is the allied race system going to be a BFA system, or is there a good likelihood of it being expanded on in future expansions? It probably will be expanded, given that this is a more generic system, not a specialized system like garrisons or artifacts or order halls and other such things. This is pretty open, kind of like a dungeon system, I guess. It's like, as the question suggests, something that can be expanded on. The one thing that I would like to know is that while it was already said by Blizzard that they wanted to make sure that they don't overwhelm players with too many races, like they don't want to have 30 races per faction, it would be nice to get a little bit more transparency, because at the moment, whenever we as fans and critics, whenever we see something in a beta build or a line of text or a book that suggests a bipedal person that looks different, automatically we think to ourselves, oh, here we go, this is the next allied race, I knew it, this is it, baby. When in actuality, as in the case of blood trolls, that might not be the case. So it would be nice to, I guess, know a little bit more. I mean, maybe it takes away from the surprise and the intrigue of not knowing when an allied race is coming, but I don't know, it feels like there's so much controversy around the idea of allied races that it might do Blizzard good just to be very clear about what they plan reasonably ahead of time. Are we going to see a similar patch cycle for Battle for Azeroth like we did in Legion? They didn't specify if this is going to follow the whole 11-week cycle like the Legion patch cycles have suspiciously been following before, which they probably are an 11-week cycle. But the intent here, as Ion says, is that there will always be something to look forward to. Even on day one of the current patch, there's something on the horizon to look forward to. And I like that a lot. Apart from the, usual lull that we're having right now in Legion, I mean, we had the 7.35 patch, and then there was the Seething Shore Battleground, and then a lot of nothing ever since. We still have systems to take advantage of, such as Mythic Plus, which has a very long tail of content that people still participate in today. A lot of people don't. Oh, don't get me wrong, but I would argue that Legion's lull, so to speak, is probably the most friendly, or at least the least painful that it's ever been. Can you talk about how flying will be handled in Battle for Azeroth? Most specifically, will we have to level both Alliance and Horde characters to earn it? Unlocking flight in Biffa is going to be pretty much the exact same thing that we have seen in Legion, and as well as Warlords of Draenor. You do a Pathfinder Part 1, then you do a Pathfinder Part 2, and then ta-da, you get it. You do not have to do Pathfinder on both the Horde and Alliance in order to unlock flying, because what kind of idiot would suggest that? Are you planning on keeping the Pathfinder achievements to allow flight in old zones? WoD was 2 expansions ago, and it's no longer current content, so it wouldn't hurt removing it for new or returning players after a couple of expansions. Their answer was nope. Nope, they do not plan on removing the old Pathfinder achievements. They just don't want to take away the blood, sweat, and suffering that veteran players had suffered through early on. Ion also said that it's not something that is totally off the table, or at the very least, it's something that is discussed every now and then. So based on that, there's a small chance they may change their minds, so just keep bitching and throwing your body at it, and Blizzard might fall over. Can we get a rough timeline for specs that are still on the radar for major changes prior to the pre-patch? During this recording, Ion announced that the pre-patch is available now In fact, it was downloading during the stream, which caused interruptions during the stream, which really pissed me off. Yay. Ian's answer is interesting because I'm sure it's going to pretty much piss people off. He said that time is running out, and when it comes to major overhauls, ability changes, and things like that, that it's not something that they may be able to squeeze in before the pre-patch. Everything that's going on now is mostly with numbers tuning, rebalancing, and things like that, from the new abilities to balancing the Azeroth traits to even old world stuff. Unfortunately, big mechanical changes that people have expressed their disapproval on are probably not going to be addressed until the next major patch, so not until 8.1. No doubt that this is going to piss a number of people off who are concerned about maybe stuff that has to do with the global cooldown or certain rotations. In a somewhat surprising bit of transparency, he revealed that this is the reality of things, that unfortunately, sometimes we run out of time and things are going to have to be held off for a later moment. I think it's questions or answers like these that really put a test to the face of Warcraft. In this case, it's Ion Hazzikostas, and in previously we've seen the likes of Brian Halinka and Ghostcrawler and some other folks. This is the game director sticking his neck out, knowing that there are a lot of people that are going to take swings at him. So while it is undisputably disappointing that there are a number of classes, and because that's a large number of players that are going to be frustrated because it feels like the attention to them has fallen far short, at least Ian is acknowledging this, if not kind of giving up so the developers can kind of lick their wounds, reassess, and come back for another battle. So for those of you who are upset about this, stay upset. I'm still hoping for something to be done about Retribution Aura. It's probably not going to be fixed at all, or nothing's going to be done about it, but oh well. Any more updates about class buffs? So many classes do not have their class buffs, and we are very close to launch. Many were active during BlizzCon, which was great to see. It's not going to feel good to only have a few classes having buffs, while others do not. I actually released a video just yesterday talking about class buffs and how they've been updated since very early BlizzCon when everyone had buffs, and now very, very few people have buffs. It turns out that my assessment is pretty much aligned with what Ian had said, that when it comes to class differentiation or otherwise celebrating the class fantasy of certain specs, that it's important to not just add buffs or features to a class just because, hey, we're adding it to like this number of classes. We need to have everything for everybody so that everyone is like even. Ian made an example of druids having a lot of utility, which is why they don't happen to have Mark of the Wild. That's the kind of approach that Blizzard is taking, with only 3 classes having primary stat buffs and only 2 classes, which happens to be like the newer classes, the Monk and the Demon Hunter, that provide class debuffs. But it's okay for me because I, as a Paladin, have Retribution Aura. Yeah. Will classes play like they are on beta during the BFA pre-patch, or will there be some temporary adjustments to compensate for things that might not play as well before getting to 120 and having Azeroth gear and so on and so forth? Basically, no. Right now, with the pre-patch on the PTR, there's still a number of steps that Blizzard needs to take in order to hash things out, mostly with number balancing, which is what they're starting on now. Along with the numbers for our classes, our abilities, and talents, with all that being rebalanced, at the same time, they're going to be adjusting current content, as in raids, mythic raids, and whatnot, with the intention that it's going to feel relatively the same when it comes to the results. Performance-wise, it's probably going to feel a little bit awkward not having certain abilities, artifact abilities, certain things that are now baked in or removed. But the approach that Blizzard is trying to take is that they don't want to make the content feel harder than it is right now. We may not have our artifacts, but we still have active legendaries, our set bonuses, and all that stuff. Are we going to see the new systems, talent, and stat squish early at pre-patch release? Any info if it is going to release soon? Well, yeah, we're going to see pretty much everything. The new systems, the stat squish, the talent changes, the artifact going away, war mode, a butter croissant wrapped in snakeskin. Pretty much all that stuff is kicking in. The only thing that they didn't talk about was the timeline of all the different lore-related systems, like all the pre-expansion systems that are going to be coming out, and by this I'm talking about the event in Darkshore, Teldrassil, the Battle for Lordaeron. We don't quite have a timetable for that yet. Will War Mode be available in the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch? Why did they ask this? Going with the previous question, yes, that's going in too. So that's also going to mean that server types are going to change too, and there will only be 2 types, PvE and roleplay. There seems to be a lot of confusion about War Mode on RP and RP PvP realms. Will we be sharded only with players from our own realm who have war mode turned on and off, or will things stay the same? So there's only going to be two kinds of realms, RP realms and not RP realms, and from there war mode is a toggle. With regards to RP realms, when you turn war mode on, you're still only going to see people on your realm who also happen to have war mode turned on. That's it. So, to triple reinforce this idea, if you want to have an old school kind of community feel, you're probably going to want to sign up with an RP realm. Just try to not step on anyone's toes. Are the cross-realm restrictions on mythic raids still going forward? This is probably one of the more interesting and maybe exciting answers that came from this Q&A. So here's how this stuff is going to work. Once a mythic raid start going on, there's going to be a worldwide race, not region-wide, worldwide. The first 100 guilds in the world to clear the first raid, and in this case it's Uldir, they will get a fancy schmancy achievement indicating that yes, they were one of the first 100 guilds to have completed the raid. With respect to maybe the 101st and so on that happen to get that kill on the same lockout, they're also going to be counted for that too. So it's going to be like a little bit more than the first 100. It's going to be like 100 plus a couple of leftovers. And let me clarify too, this is the first 100 guilds per faction, so 100 Horde guilds, 100 Alliance guilds. As soon as this top 100 per faction thing is tallied up, that achievement will close and cross-realm mythic raiding will open up. So that's not bad at all. I don't have time right now, it just kind of came to mind, but I'm wondering just how long did it take the first 100 guilds to complete such and such raid, like back in the day, because that'll give us kind of a relative idea. I know it's going to be different for like each raid and so on and so forth, but it'll give us kind of an idea of how long it will in fact take for cross-realm raiding to come out, because Ian and they had said that it took a little bit too long. It was a little bit too restrictive to unlock cross-realm mythic raiding, because normally, as we know it as it is right now, we have to wait until the next tier of content opens up before this opens up. Even as a non-mythic raider kind of person, I'm all for something like this that gives more players more access a little bit sooner after a reasonable amount of time. I think I had done a video a little ways back where I talked about, hey, maybe they should open up cross-realm mythic raiding maybe a couple of weeks after the final LFR wing is released. That seems to be like a sufficient amount of time. Maybe it's not, but like I said, I'm just curious, what is the relative timeline? Like, how long is that usually for the first 100 or so guilds to nail that achievement? Will the artifact be disabled after the retirement quests, or will it automatically be disabled like on beta? It doesn't make sense story-wise for a new artifact to be sacrificed for something the character has not yet encountered. The artifact will be disabled on the pre-patch. My guess is that we're going to get the event or the cutscene or whatever the heck it's going to be that's going to send off the artifact shortly before that. When you retire our artifact weapons, will we just lose the artifact power and abilities, or will they also lose the relics that give them their boost in item level? You do lose the abilities and traits. The item level, though, is being preserved, and for context, the item level on my particular weapon on live is I think like 991 or so. These are not exact numbers, but it's about 991, so I guess it's pretty high. On the alpha though, on the beta though, it goes all the way down to I think about 250, I think a little bit under 250. It's still going to be a decent weapon, but also with the weapon changes, as in weapon multipliers aren't going to work the exact same way anymore. Weapons are more like a stat stick. It's not going to be as impactful as you think. You'll probably replace your weapon around like 115 or so, but that's going to really depend on, let's say, like quest rewards, or if it happens to like Warforge or something whenever you get a reward. Can you please reconsider locking artifact skins behind specialization restrictions? It made sense when we were actually using the weapons, but once BFA hits, a class restriction would be more than enough to keep the fantasy intact. Ian basically said no. The explanation was kind of inadequate. They just want to keep it like this. They want to make the spec restriction feel the same. As a small plus though, they are going to allow the breaking of the rules in this case, where I believe the example that they used was with a Holy Paladin. As we all know, a Holy Paladin artifact weapon is a big two-hander, where traditionally they've been using like a sword and shield, or a one hand and an offhand. In this case, Battle for Azeroth will allow, in the case of having like two offhands, or a one hand and an offhand, that they can transmog that into the one-handed Holy Paladin weapon. And this will apply everywhere else. If you're a Guardian Druid, it doesn't matter what kind of weapons you have, you'll still be able to get pretty much whatever Guardian artifact appearance that you want. You can't switch any gear while in a Mythic Plus right now in Battle for Azeroth. Is this intended or a bug? At the moment, it is not a bug. I'm going to try to have extended thoughts on this in a separate video, but I'm going to brush on this right now. Blizzard's view of Mythic Plus is quite similar to kind of a joke that I've made throughout the past couple months with regards to Mythic Plus, that Mythic Plus is akin to a raiding counter. It's just that Mythic Plus is much longer. Like it's like 20-30 minutes or so, whereas a raiding counter is anywhere between 5 and 15 minutes. In that sense, there are certain things that you can't do while you're in a raiding counter or otherwise while you're in combat. You can only switch out weapons, you can't switch out talents or trinkets or anything like that. Blizzard seems to want the gearing, or like the Mythic Plus meta, to be all about the pre-planning stages before you walk into the instance, instead of going from room to room or boss to boss and constantly switching out loadouts via macro, or just basically switching out gear sets in order to meet the given needs of a certain encounter. Blizzard's intention, it seems, is that they want players, or they want teams, to plan out how they want to gear, how they want to set themselves up before they even go into an instance, so that way they are ready to tackle most, if not all, of the encounters and whatever fixes that are presented before them. This is more of a personal thought, but I think the intention here is to let players really specialize and identify who they are, as opposed to being compelled or being forced to have everything. I guess as an example, like if I'm making a group and I'm encountering like this kind of dungeon with these kinds of affixes, I want to have 2 strong single target DPSers, 1 person who's very strong at AoE, this kind of healer, and then I as a tank am whatever I am. This way, players who are trying to get into these kinds of groups where they need those sorts of specializations can, for the most part, focus on those kinds of specializations. Like, I want to be really strong at crowd control, or AoE, or single target whatever burst damage. This, I would argue, and I know that there's going to be counter arguments to this, this celebrates choice and the kind of class and spec, the way that you want to define yourself. As of right now in Legion, because we're able to freely swap gear, it's going to be just assumed that you've got to have everything instead. It goes back to that notion of having an illusion of choice, where you might think that you're choosing between these different gear sets, between even encounters, and there's the fun of that meta, and it is fun, by the way. But on the other side, there is no choice, because you've got to have everything in order to participate. That's a little bit hyperbolic, but hopefully you kind of get what I'm saying there. The fear right now is that since we're not able to switch out gear, like let's say we're doing like a high level tyrannical and we know we need very strong defensive trinkets or legendaries or whatnot in order to just survive those mechanics, if that becomes too big of a problem, it's something that Blizzard is going to respond to and make sure that completion rates for the most part are still where they're at right now. Maybe. When will we learn more about the new BFA Mythic Plus affixes, and will there be testing for those affixes? Mythic Plus testing is going on right now, actually. We already know that Tyrannical and Fortified are going to be pretty much the base Mythic Plus thing going in every week, so we can just count on Fortified, Tyrannical, it's just going to rotate every week. There's going to be one new and temporary affix called Infested. Within pretty much every given pack, there is a hand-picked mob that is chosen to be infested. These targets are considered deadlier and resistant to crowd control. When you kill that mob, it spawns a little parasite. That's the thing that infested the mob, and that's going to eventually jump to another enemy unless you kill it. Like I said, this particular affix is temporary. It's mostly aligned with Gahun, the blood god, which the affix's theme is based on. And so far, Mythic 10 is going to be what unlocks the best loot, as in stuff from the chest, as well as from the weekly chest, which is also still coming back. How competitive is gear from Mythic Keystones intended to be compared to raids, and will Azeroth effects scale up when it drops in higher keystone levels? So the answer to this was, maybe I missed something. It felt a little bit incomplete. I'm going to answer this the best that I can. Gear from Mythic Keystone Dungeons is going to scale up like it used to, with 5 item level increments depending on the difficulty. The exception in this case will be with Azeroth gear, though. Azeroth gear is going to have item level bracket differences of 15. From Ian's example, there's going to be different levels of Azeroth gear that comes from level 4s, level 7s, and Mythic level 10s. The thing that I'm not quite on top of yet is Ian's explanation on how going past blue quality gear, that epic gear is going to come mostly from lockouts, which includes Mythic Plus, which I don't quite get. Totally not sure about this, but it almost sounds like Azerite gear isn't going to come from the chest at the end of the dungeon. It's only going to come out from the Challenger's chest every reset. As for it being competitive, gear from Mythic Keystone dungeons at a level of 10 is supposed to be equivalent to the heroic rating of the time. Meanwhile, if you finish a 10, you're expected to get a Mythic level quality piece of gear from that weekly chest. So that's not bad. I'm curious to see how a level 10 feels in the Battle for Azeroth. Is it going to feel any different from how a 10 feels right now? On launch, how are Mythic dungeons going to work? I believe in Legion that the first 3 weeks were locked to 845 item level. Pretty much that. The first couple weeks of the Battle for Azeroth, you're going to get access to normal, heroic, as well as mythic, and then everything else is going to be opening up at the same time raids open up. So on week 1, you get the normal and heroic raid, you get mythic plus dungeons, you get Titan Forging up to a certain point. Week 2 of the raid is when everything opens up. So not bad, and as you notice, this is, to be honest, a lot of like non-information. It's pretty obvious, run-of-the-mill, the usual stuff. How exactly does the catch-up mechanic for the Heart of Azeroth work? Each week reduces the amount of HP needed by how much? Approximately a third, according to Ian. Unlike Legion, where artifact knowledge made the amount of artifact power that you would earn increase by 30%, compounding. In this case, the requirement to get to your next level is going to be divided by like however much that is. I'm pretty bad at math. What this translates to is that for the typical player who might be on like a little bit every day or every other day, they'll only see like maybe 4-digit numbers whenever you'll see at most a 4-digit number when you're earning artifact power. That's expected to last up until the end of the expansion or when artifact knowledge just stops going up. And I like that. I mean, it doesn't change too much. I mean, to me, the biggest thing is that the Heart of Azeroth isn't spec specific. We just have one artifact to level up. But from a perception standpoint, it'll just be nice not seeing like a big 8-digit number flashing in front of my face that I'm spam clicking at the end of a day of raiding or something. Can you expand on how loot will be distributed from PvP in Battle for Azeroth? Ian pretty much went over the whole thing. There's the random strong boxes that you might already be used to. There is a weekly progression sort of thing. So week 1, when PvP starts, you'll see a piece of gear. You need to get a certain amount of conquest within that week in order to get that piece of gear. And ta-da! And each week you'll unlock the ability to get another piece until you complete that set, and then you keep progressing up from there. There are going to be catch-up mechanisms, so if you happen to fall a couple weeks behind, you'll be able to quickly catch up, get to the same level as your buddies or your rivals. There's going to be a third this is like 6. There's going to be a third way to get gear. This is going to be based on your rating, and depending on your rating, you'll be put in a certain bucket, and depending on the bucket that you're in, and I don't recall the classifications, let's just go with silver, gold, and platinum or something like that. But depending on your bracket, every week you'll be able to open a different kind of Challenger's chest that's going to have some goodies inside. It's meant to be similar to that of Mythic Plus, where it is better gear than what you would otherwise get. How long will PvP seasons last in Battle for Azeroth? Will they be similar to length in Legion, or will they go back to corresponding with raid tiers like in previous expansions? Ian explained that he wants the seasons to be a little bit longer. Not so much aligned with raid tiers, but what he also wants to add is a post-season kind of period. This way there isn't that period of where you're effectively earning nothing. You'll still be able to get rewards during this postseason period, and this first postseason will start at the end of this expansion. And that pretty much wraps things up. And looking back, I don't think I gave a lot of personal thoughts on very many of these questions because this was all a very informational thing. This doesn't give a whole lot of room for opinions. But what do you think of the Q&A this time? Was it or was it okay? Because I firmly don't think that this is like, oh my god, this is so exciting. There are some things that have me pretty excited, including this whole top 100 Hall of Fame sort of dealy. I'm very interested to see how the community reacts to that when the time comes, especially when it comes to faction balance. What are teams going to do now? So if you don't mind sharing your thoughts in a comment below, I'd appreciate it. I'm happy to start a conversation, or 3 or 4 or 20. If you enjoyed this little recap, podcasty sort of thing, please press that like button, and otherwise, please support the channel the best way you know how, including maybe considering becoming a patron so I can give you more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.